Thank you.
Thank you. In Feuer und Flamm hat man uns gebrannt. Überall hat man uns gemacht zu Schande und zu Spott. Doch abzuwenden hat uns keiner nicht gekannt. Von dir, mein Gott, von deiner heilige Teure, von dein Gebot. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Tag und Nacht, nur ich tracht, und ich bett. Geschieht mit Meure, dein heilige Teure, und ich bett. Rette uns, rette uns, die scheun Zeit, bis ich uns die heilige Obes, Herr, zu mein Gebet und mein Gewinn, weil helfen kannst du, nur du allein. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So, ich glaube, jetzt bin ich dran. So, I think it's now my time to begin and to start with this evening. Thank you very much.
Was it clear? Was it clear?
It was really wonderful. Thank you very much, Cantor.
Thank you.
Heinowitz. It was great, great. And Mr. Goldstein, thank you very much. So, it's wonderful to see you. I can't see you all. I can say we have now visitors from all over the world. I see my friend Salomon Ritz, the Vice President of the Memorial Foundation of Jewish Culture from Sweden. And I think with Susan, his wife, yes, hi, brother. I can see Jenny Friedman, our CEO from the Memorial Foundation from New York. I see David Jacobson, the Vice CEO from the Memorial Foundation from South Africa, Cape Town. I see nearly the whole family from Isma George from the USA. Rebecca and Naomi, nice to meet you. I see a lot of other people here. I don't know everybody from you, but I see that you are interested in the themes which we are now preparing for the whole year of 700 years in Jews in Germany. And thank you very much, Mrs. Sheridan Quent, who is guiding us through this evening, and a lot of appreciation for Tova Hoeti, who was preparing this evening. And now we are coming to Ismail Short, who is a friend of mine since some years. He was president of the Memorial Foundation when we met in I think we met in Mexico, not the first time in Mexico, and we prepared our reunion in Hanover 3 years ago, or 3 years or 4 years ago, I don't remember. 4 years ago, great, I would say, great visiting people from all over the world with the Memorial culture. Now, I think Ms. Sheridan Quant will guide us through this evening, and I will come later to you again. Please.
Vielen Dank, Herr Fürst, für die einleitenden Worte. Ich hoffe, alle können mich gut hören und verstehen. Mir ist gesagt worden, die Mehrheit versteht Deutsch. Von daher werde ich in Deutsch führen. Ich werde den englischsprachigen Vortrag ist nicht so gut, Herr Fürst, doch lieber auch Englisch? Halbe, halbe? Dann entscheide ich mich um und rede immer kurz, aber dafür in beiden Sprachen, damit jeder was davon hat. I have just made the decision based on Mr. Fürst's hand signals that I will moderate the evening in both English and German. In order to not draw us out forever and ever, I will keep what I say to the minimum. I will keep it short and will say it in both languages. Dieser Abend findet in einer besonderen Zeit statt. Eine Zeit, die es uns auch zwingt, neue Arten des Zusammenseins zu finden. Eine Zeit, die trotz aller Einschränkungen uns auch Chancen bietet, vielleicht auch unkomplizierter als jemals zuvor, wirklich internationale Begegnungen zu ermöglichen. This evening takes place in special times, times that force us to find new ways of being together, times that in spite of all restrictions and limitations also offer us opportunities. In this case, the opportunity to have an international encounter in a way that is perhaps less complicated than ever before. And we are all learning new things and new technologies, and in order to come together in this way internationally. Die musikalischen Beiträge dieses Abends stammen von Kantor Ascher Heinowitz, begleitet von Raymond Goldstein, die wir ganz zu Anfang mit dem klagenden Psalm 22 gehört haben. Ascher Heinowitz wurde in Jerusalem geboren und ist seit 40 Jahren Rasan der Jeschurun-Synagoge in Jerusalem. Als junger Mann hat er aber im damaligen Rhodesien, heute Simbabwe, Südafrika und Großbritannien als Kantor gewirkt. Raymond Goldstein ist in Südafrika geboren, zog aber nach Israel, wo er in Jerusalem und Tel Aviv wirkt, und er hat Konzertreisen auf mehreren Kontinenten unternommen. The musical contributions this evening come from Kantor Ascher Heinowitz, accompanied by Raymond Goldstein, whom we heard in the beginning with Psalm 22. Ascher Heinowitz was born in Jerusalem and has been Chazan of the Yeshurun synagogue in Jerusalem for 40 years. But as a young man, he also worked as a cantor in Rhodesia, as it was then, now Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Great Britain. And Raymond Goldstein was born in South Africa, but moved to Israel, and has also traveled around the world with concert tours on several continents. So a truly international duo. Der Lebensweg von Professor Ismar Schorsch begann hier in Hannover. Er wurde 1935 in der Wedekindstraße als zweites Kind von Emil und Fanny Schorsch geboren. Sein Vater, Emil Schorsch, war 1927 als zweiter Rabbiner der jüdischen Gemeinde neben Samuel Freund nach Hannover gekommen. Er prägte insbesondere die Jugendarbeit, die auch eine besondere Bedeutung hatte in dieser Zeit, in der die Gemeinden für viele jüdische Jugendliche in Deutschland die einzige Zuflucht und der einzige geschützte Raum waren. Familie Schorsch ist es gelungen, dem nationalsozialistischen Terror zu entkommen. Emil und Fanny Schorsch flohen 1938 mit den Kindern Hannah und Isma nach England und 1940 in die USA. Professor Schorsch hat eine illustre wissenschaftliche Karriere hinter sich. Er war zuletzt Kanzler des Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. The path of Professor Isma Schorsch began here in Hanover. He was born in 1935 in Wedekinstraße, the second child of Emil and Fanny Schorsch. His father, Emil Schorsch, came to Hanover in 1927 as the second rabbi of the Jewish community after Samuel Freund. He left a particular impression on the youth arbeit of the synagogue community, which was very, very important in a time when young Jewish people in Germany found, in many cases, their only soccer and their only protected space within the Jewish communities, away from the threatening society around them. The Schorsch family managed to escape from the terror of the National Socialist regime, fleeing to England with their two children, Hannah and Isma, in 1938, and on to the USA in 1940. And Professor Schorsch has a most illustrious academic career to his name. His last position was as Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. And before we move to his much anticipated talk, I would like to explain in German something for the German-speaking audience and how the technical steps they need to take to understand what you say in English, Professor Schorsch. So if you excuse me, there's going to be a small technical explanation in German. Für alle, die das Englisch, das wunderbare, schöne, alte New Yorker Englisch von Herrn Schorsch nicht verstehen oder nicht ausreichend verstehen, gibt es die Möglichkeit, eine Simultanübersetzung im Chat zu verfolgen. Sie müssen dazu aber etwas unternehmen, weil Frau Hareti den Bildschirm gleich teilen wird, um Bilder zu zeigen, die Herr Schorsch zeigen möchte. Sie werden dann vielleicht einen Schreck kriegen und denken, oh je, das ist alles weg. Es ist nicht alles weg. Sie gehen dann bitte mit Ihrer Maus auf den unteren Bereich des Bildschirms und tippen da auf Chat. Und dann eröffnet sich ein kleines weißes Fenster. Und in diesem Fenster gibt es links die Überschrift Versenden an und daneben ein Feld mit einem kleinen Pfeil drin. Es kann sein, dass Sie gerade mit Freunden geschrieben haben und dass dann ein persönlicher Name da steht. Wenn Sie auf das Pfeil gehen, erscheint ganz oben alle. Klicken Sie an alle und dann kriegen Sie das Gemeinschaftsgespräch mit. Dann sehen Sie, was ich an alle schreibe. Sie können selber, glaube ich, nicht eingreifen und nicht schreiben. Das müssen Sie auch gar nicht. Wenn ich Fehler mache, stehe ich dazu. Aber dann können Sie in dem kleinen weißen Fenster zusätzlich die englische Übersetzung von Herrn Schorschs Rede verfolgen. So that was the technical explanation for German-speaking listeners. And now we look forward very much, Professor Schorsch, to hearing the first part of your lecture about with the title Reflections on Efforts to Understand the Holocaust. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sheridan Quantz. I am indebted to you for your immediate translation into German. I am delighted to see so many people. Dr. Litton and his wife, who visited me a few summers ago in New York, and of course, Mr. Fürst and friends from all over. And just to make sure that the audience would be large enough, I invited my family and a few friends from America. So I can only say that they would have preferred traveling to Hanover rather than doing it through Zoom, but we will do that some other day. Tova Hareti, thank you so much for your invitation. And to make things easier for you, I have given Tova a roadmap that I would like to take you on. These are books that I will touch on during the course of my remarks. And my object is to give you an idea of how history is written. There are three things that I would like to make clear. One is direction. The writing of history over time shows direction. There is a point of departure, and over the years, there is development, change, and direction. We are commemorating some 75 years of historical writing on the Holocaust. And what I would like to show you briefly is the direction in which this writing of Holocaust history has gone. The second thing that I would like to convey to you is the importance of context. You cannot understand an event or even a document if you do not identify the correct context. I can give you a painful example. The struggle in Washington now is to determine the correct context of the insurrection that happened on January 6th. If that context is not correctly identified, the understanding of that insurrection will be misconstrued and distorted. That challenge to find the right context.
18:30 ist das schon.
Ja.
Every historian. And finally, I would like to show you that over time there is a dialectic in the writing of history. Books respond to other books, and that is what makes the writing of history a battlefield, because often there are bitter controversies between books and historians. So let me start with two books that were written in Hanover. And I do so not merely to flatter Hanover, but to indicate that Hanover's Erinnerungskultur has actually made an important historical contribution. The first book that I would like to mention to you is the catalog of the 2011 exhibit in Hanover called Abgeschoben in den Tod, thrown out into death, would be my clumsy translation. This was a remarkable catalog. It was a catalog on the occasion of remembering the 1,001 Jews living in Hanover who were expelled to Riga in December of 1941. The catalog is handsomely illustrated. It has individual essays that are particularly illuminating. Just one example, there is an essay that breaks new ground, and that essay deals with the auctions that were held by the finance ministry after the confiscation of Jewish property of those who were expelled in 1941. This kind of research is exceedingly important because it shows that information as to what was happening to the Jews in a particular locality was well known to others in that locality in order to sell the art and the furniture and the jewelry that had been confiscated. One had to prepare lists and circulate them publicly so that they could be purchased. This kind of research is now going on in a dramatic way in Berlin, where, of course, the Jewish population was far greater. Just one other contribution to that catalog is the effort by Peter Schulze to recover the names of the 1,001 individuals who were expelled in December of 1941. This is an extremely complicated undertaking, and the research that Dr. Schulze put in is a dramatic reward for recovering these names. There is a painful passage from the Russian Jewish poet Akhmatova, in which she writes, I'd like to call you all by name, but the list has been removed and there is nowhere else to look. That is the fate of those who were entrapped in the Nazi net. They lost their names. When an individual entered a concentration camp, he or she had no more than a number burned on their arm. To recover the names of those who were expelled on December 15th, 1941, was a gargantuan exercise for which I admire Peter Schulze. The next book that I would like to bring to your attention is also a product of someone who lives in Hanover. This is a book written by a journalist, Jens Gundlach, on a leader of the Evangelische Kirche, first in Niedersachsen and then from 1936 on in Berlin. His name is Heinz Brunotte, and this is a meticulous biography of a churchman who politically and theologically starts from the left and moves progressively to the right. The subtitle of Gundlach's book is Die Anpassung des Evangeliums an die NS-Diktatur. And that is the theme of the book, the efforts that Heinz Brunotte made to align his theology and politics with the leadership of the Nazi regime. It is a study of the erosion of the Evangelische Kirche in Niedersachsen, and in truth in all of Germany. as you might appreciate, the critical issue for the evangelische Kirche was die Judenfrage. What do you do with converts who find themselves in the evangelische Kirche but were born Jews? The political philosophy of the Nazi regime is biological, and for the Nazis, religious conversion was of no significance. And what Gundlach shows is that Brunotta gradually appropriates the theological and political positions of the Nazi leadership. Brunotta begins with a membership in the Brennende Kirche, but he leaves the Brennende Kirche because the pressure on him by the Nazis is excessive. So once he moves to Berlin, he departs from Karl Barth, he departs from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and he departs from others who are the backbone of the Bekennende Kirche. There are 4 issues. What do you do with Protestant pastors born Jewish, but now members of the Evangelische Kirche? What do you do with congregants in your Gemeinde who were born Jewish and are now Protestants? What is the response to the Youth in Asia experiment by the Nazi regime? Youth in Asia is a German experiment executed in Poland in October and November of 1939. 7,000 handicapped and terminally ill Poles are executed. The success of that euthanasia program is taken back to Nazi Germany, and in November of 1939, it is begun on German citizens who are no longer deemed worthy of sustaining. And finally, what do you do with those Protestants of Jewish ancestry who are in your church? By 1940 and 41, they were excluded by Nazi policy from the Gemeinde. Well, how do you minister to these converts without violating Nazi edicts? On all of these issues, Gundlach shows that Brunotta gradually adopts the position of the Nazi dictatorship. And I think that the reason that Gundlach was fascinated by this sad story is because after the war, he suffered no consequences for his embrace of Nazi policy. He is reinstated in the leadership of the Evangelische Kirche and continues to serve the church till he dies. This is a story that needs to be compared to the monumental biography of Eberhard Bethge, of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This is a biography that was first published in 1967. It has now gone through 8 editions. Bethge was a student of Bonhoeffer. He was a dear friend when Bonhoeffer was killed by the Nazis just a week before the end of the war. Bethge takes over his nachlass and produces his biography. The 2 books need to be written together because Bonhoeffer resisted the Nazi effort to reduce the autonomy of the Evangelische Kirche from the beginning. And eventually Bonhoeffer is a participant of the uprising of July 20th, 1944, and loses his life, along with 6,000 other individuals who identified with the Stauffenberg assassination attempt. So I bring the 2 books of Bethge and Gundlach together because they are a marvelous contrast of religious behavior in the face of extreme political pressure. And now allow me to come to Holocaust research. And I will begin with a book that is familiar to many by Raoul Hilberg called The Destruction of European Jews. And it came out in 1961. Like many of the early historians of the Holocaust, Hilberg is born abroad. He was born in 1926 in Vienna. His parents were Polish immigrants to Vienna from Galicia, obviously fleeing the pogroms of the civil wars following the end of World War I and even taking place during the First World War. Hilberg comes to Columbia and he becomes fascinated by the huge amount of documentation left by the Nazi regime, documentation that was brought out in the Nuremberg trials. And as a result of this primary source material, Hilberg wrote a book of close to 800 pages with 2 columns on each page. And it is a painful examination of the industrialization of mass murder. Using German documents, Hilberg moves from stage to stage, defining who is a Jew, expropriating the property of Jews through Aryanization, concentrating Jews in ghettos, in Hanover, in Warsaw, wherever the Nazis achieved power, and then finally the annihilation of Jews in 2 ways, through Einsatzgruppen in Ukraine after the invasion of June 1941, and by mobile units, and then by concentration camps. This is the roadmap for all future Holocaust research, but it is not without consequences. The focus on what the perpetrators did to the victims is so meticulous and minute that one is left with the impression that this was an inevitable unilinear path from the idea of the destruction of European Jewry to its implementation after the invasion of Russia in 1941. Hilberg wrapped this narrative in a larger conception of anti-Semitism being a constant of Jewish history, a constant that culminates in Hitler's maniacal views of Jewish power. In Hilberg's reconstruction of the final solution, there is no room for serendipity. One stage follows the other as if dictated from the beginning. To put it bluntly, it's a deterministic understanding of the Holocaust. The next author that I would like to mention is Hannah Arendt, who is probably much better known to you because of the recent film by Margareta von Trotte of Hannah Arendt. And Hannah Arendt is played marvelously by Barbara Sukova. Hannah Arendt's books are not only available in English, they're available in German as well. You can go to the Historical Museum, and in their bookshop, you will find almost every work written by Hannah Arendt in German. Hannah Arendt's book came out in 1951, and it is called The Origins of Totalitarianism. And I must admit to you that when I was a graduate student in the 1960s and read this book, I was moved by its power and evidence. It is a tour de force. It is divided into three large sections: anti-Semitism, imperialism, and totalitarianism. Hannah Arendt is fascinated by the phenomenon of totalitarianism and argues that this is the achievement of the 20th century. And you have two totalitarian regimes, the Nazis in Germany and the communists in Russia. This is a deeply flawed book, but the power of its ideas are quite irresistible. The three sections do not hang together tightly. In fact, they are only loosely connected. But what Hannah Arendt sees is that by the 20th century, you have a new phenomenon. You have masses of individuals who are no longer members of classes. They have become déclassés. They are loose. You see them first in the Dreyfus affair, where the mob screams death to the Jew. And that mob is the forerunner of the fuel and fodder of totalitarian regimes. Individuals like Lenin and Hitler succeed in captivating the imagination and loyalty of the mob, which is filled with hatred for the political establishment. And that produces a regime in which the individual is without an iota of power. In the course of studying the totalitarian regimes, Arendt introduces a number of striking ideas. She speaks about statelessness, and that is what the masses become when the totalitarian dictators come in. They strip the masses of citizenship, and people without citizenship are rightless. There is no longer any protection. The government is no longer their protector. It becomes now their persecutor and exterminator. Hannah Arendt writes also about the destruction of individuality. The totalitarian regime progressively strips each individual of his or her personality, so that by the time this degradation is finished, the individual moves willingly to the gas chamber. And the concentration camps are called by Hannah Arendt the holes of oblivion, because once one is forced into a concentration camp, no longer does the individual lose his or her name. They lose their identity. They are lost to the world, never to re-emerge. And the final notion that Hannah Arendt gives us is the idea of radical evil, the kind of evil which has not yet appeared in modern European history. Camus, in a different situation, writes of totalitarianism. None of the evils which totalitarianism claims to remedy is worse than totalitarianism itself. And Hannah Arendt proves this in her examination of Stalin and Hitler. They are embodiments of evil worthy of each other. As is well known, Hannah Arendt emerges again in 1962 with her essays on the Eichmann trial. Eichmann had been captured in May of 1960 in Argentina, thanks to the information provided by Fritz Bauer, the public prosecutor in Hesse, to the Israeli authorities in Jerusalem. Bauer was warned not to try to bring Eichmann to Frankfurt. So the Israelis captured him, and Ben-Gurion made the decision to try him publicly in Israel for crimes against the Jewish people. And Ben-Gurion's objective was to reveal to the world the suffering of the victims. Ben-Gurion and many others understood that at the Nuremberg trials from 45 on, the focus was on what Nazis did to their victims, crimes against humanity. And Ben-Gurion and many others felt that the suffering of the victims was submerged. So the Eichmann trial was meant to instruct not only Israelis, but the world. Arendt was not particularly happy with the Eichmann trial. She observed parts of the trial. She also used the opportunity in Jerusalem to visit the pyramids in Egypt. And then when she came to write, she expressed so much of her displeasure with Ben-Gurion, the trial, and Gideon Hauser. The trial should never have been held in Israel. It should have been held before an international court. Much of the testimony was irrelevant, had nothing to do with Eichmann himself. Hannah Arendt was critical with Jewish behavior. It was passive. The Judenräte, the Jewish councils, cooperated, collaborated. They made the work of the Nazis in gathering the Jews and deporting the Jews much easier than it should have been. And Hannah Arendt speculates how much difficult would the final solution have been if the Jews had been disorganized, which of course is an utterly illegitimate speculation. The Jews were what they were. They succeeded in surviving the diaspora precisely because they were elegantly self-governed. The aftermath of Eichmann in Jerusalem, which she titled Banality of Evil, came immediately. The title was her sympathy for Eichmann himself. Eichmann was not a monster. Eichmann was simply following orders. Eichmann was the embodiment of a hard-working bureaucrat seeking to please his superiors. And so she came up with the notion of banality of evil. The explosion you know well of, and it has not subsided to this day. Sholem reprimanded Hannah Arendt for lacking any love for the people Israel. And Hans Jonas, her dear friend from the days of Marburg, broke his relationship with Hannah Arendt. Both of them had been students of Martin Heidegger in Marburg. In 1950, Hannah Arendt came back to Germany for the Jewish Reconstruction effort. She contacted Heidegger, and their relationship was renewed. Hans Jonas, who fought in the Israeli army, who fought in the British army, who wrote the military code for the Israeli army, could not bring himself to return to Heidegger. And when he eventually did years later, There was not a single word of remorse or contrition by Heidegger. And Hans Jonas left after 20 minutes. And it took years for the friendship between Jonas and Hannah Arendt to come back. Maybe the most significant result of the Eichmann trial were the Auschwitz trials in Frankfurt from 63 to 65. Bauer had been instrumental in the capture. He now felt sufficiently emboldened to hold trials for 22 Nazi bureaucrats and military figures. The highest of them was Robert Mulke, who had been the deputy commandant of Auschwitz. The Auschwitz trials have recently been captured, or the mood in Frankfurt was recently captured in a German film called Das Schweigen, which shows the degree to which former Nazis still dominated the social and cultural life of Frankfurt. Bauer was warned not to tamper with them. He disregarded the advice, and the Auschwitz trials brought back to Germany almost 200 witnesses to continue the story of the victims. And that's what I would like to suggest, that with the Eichmann trial and the Auschwitz trials, you get a shift from the focus on the perpetrators to the victims. And the one scholar who brings this story to culmination is Lucy Davidovich. Davidovich is well known for her book, The War Against the Jews, 1933-1945. Davidovich was born in New York of Eastern European parents. She fell in love with Yiddish and Eastern European culture. She wrote and she produced a beautiful anthology of life in Eastern Europe before the war. And in 1938, she goes back on a fellowship to Vilna, where the Yiddish Scientific Institute had been created in 1925. And there she lives in the home of Zelig Kalmanovich. That year changed her life. Davidovich said she did not go to Vilna to seek her identity. She went to Vilna to find wholeness. She came back to New York just days before the outbreak of the war. She returned by train to Berlin, not by flight to New York. And she devoted the rest of her life to the study of East European Jewry, working for YIVO and then the American Jewish Committee. And her book is a milestone in the development of Holocaust historiography, because the war against the Jews tells the whole story for the first time. Hilberg told the first half of the story, the perpetrators, and Davidovich now completed that story with the second half of her book, that deals with the Holocaust, what happened to the victims. The first half of the book is titled The Final Solution. The second half, The Holocaust. And in that second half, she uses extensively Yiddish primary sources to show the different ways in which Jews survived in the ghetto. They were underfed. Just a couple of 100 calories of food a day. Jews in Warsaw survived on the basis of smugglers who could crawl through the barbed wire and the stone fences. And they were often children because the smugglers had to be small in size. The ghetto administered its own health care. The ghetto promoted culture. There was a living Jewish existence in the ghetto. And that is what Davidovich brought out. What made the book controversial is that she also had a political theory. And that is that the Holocaust, the elimination of European Jewry, was in Hitler's mind from the beginning. A nightmare which he developed from 1918 to 1918 after the war to 1924 in Mein Kampf. And there he envisioned already the destruction of European Jewry. And the title of Davidovich's book shows that Hitler's war against Eastern Europe was an effort to finalize the destruction of European Jewry. So there is a straight line from Mein Kampf to the final solution. But what Davidovich has contributed is an enormous expansion of the circumference of the Holocaust. With Hilberg, we are entrapped in the story of the perpetrators. We lose sight of the suffering of the victims. Lucy Davidovich enlarges the arena of Holocaust research by introducing the victims. And that is a major alteration in the context of the Holocaust. The title of the book is unfortunately deterministic, and much of the debate over Davidovich's book has been misdirected at her political thesis rather than her empathy and command of Jewish life in the ghettos under the Nazis. So, as I would do with my doctoral students in a seminar, I'm going to give you a break of 5 minutes to renew your energy level, and then I will finish off the second half of my remarks when we return.
Yankele? Schlaf je mir schon ein Kalle mein Scheiner, die Ekelach die Schwarzinke macht zu. Eingale so schön alle Zändela, los ganze Nacht die Mama nicht zur Ruhe. Eingale so schön alle Zändela, los ganze Nacht die Mama nicht zur Ruhe. Eingale so schön alle Zändela und wird mit Masel bald in Cheder gehen. Lernen wird Chumisch und Gemorre. Soll weinen, wenn die Mama wiegt ihm ein. Und lernen wird Chumisch und Gemorre. Soll weinen, wenn die Mama wiegt ihm ein. Eingale, wo's lernen wird Gemorre. Und steht der Tate Welt und hält sich zu. Eingale, wo's wächst total mit Hochem. Los ganze Nacht die Mame nicht zur Ruhe. Eingale, wo's wächst total mit Hochem. Los ganze Nacht die Mame nicht zur Ruhe. Eingale, wo's wächst total mit Hochem. Nageniter Seuche euch zugleich. Eingale a kluger Chossenbocher, so liegen a so nass wie na Teich. Eingale a kluger Chossenbocher, so liegen a so nass wie na Teich. Schlaf je mir schon mein kluger Chossenbocher. Weiligst du in Wiegale bei mir. Es wird kosten noch viel Mie und Mames Tränen. Bis wann es wird ein Mensch heraus von dir. Es wird kosten noch viel Mie und Mames Tränen. Bis wann es wird ein Mensch heraus von dir. Schlaf je mir schon Jankale, mein Schöner. Die Egerlach, die Schwarzinke macht zu. Eingale, wo so schön alle Zändela. Muss noch die Mame singen, Halleluja. Eingale, wo so schön alle Zändela. Muss noch die Mame singen,
Vielen Dank. Nun kehren wir zu Herrn Schorsch zurück. Professor Schorsch.
Thank you very much, Cantor Heinovitz, for reminding us of the rich culture that was preserved in those ghettos in Eastern Europe. With Lucy Davidovich's contribution, the focus of Holocaust research now shifts to the victims. And here I want to just briefly mention two significant works. The first by Isaiah Trunk, who was born in Poland, got his master's degree at a Polish university in Warsaw, subsequently came to the United States and earned his doctorate. Trunk, like Lucy Davidovich, worked at YIVO and devoted himself to studying the phenomenon of Judenräte. Hannah Arendt had been critical in a failure of understanding. She even termed Leo Beck a Führer, a title that she wisely took out of her book, The Banality of Evil. Trunk now produced in 1972, already a few years before Davidovich, a major study of the Judenräte in Eastern Europe. He ended up studying some 405 different Judenräte, Jewish councils that were the political organization of a good 5.5 million Jews. The book is divided thematically into 21 chapters, and its overriding conclusion is that you cannot generalize about the Judenräte. Hannah Arendt was tempted to do that, and Trunk corrects her. It is impossible. It is a huge distortion of historical veracity to lump them all together. Leadership varied. The relationship between the pre-war leadership and the leadership of the individual Judenrat varied from place to place. And so Trunk offered a serious correction of the temptation to generalize about the fate and behavior of Jews in Eastern Europe. The next book that I would like to bring to your attention moves in the same direction, a study of the victims. And that is a book that came out in 2007 called Who Will Write Our History? And its author is a professor of Eastern European history at Trinity College in Hartford. His name is Samuel Passau, and Passau was born in a DP camp in Stuttgart in the middle 1940s. Passau devotes his book to the reconstruction of Oneg Shabbos. Resistance in the ghettos takes different forms, as Davidovich already realized. There is military uprising, the ghetto uprising that begins on April 19th, but physical resistance is not the only form that Jewish resistance takes. And the Oneg Shabbos response to the Warsaw ghetto is one of the most imaginative and strengthening responses. Oneg Shabbos is the joy that comes with the celebration of Shabbos. The undertaking of Emanuel Ringelblum has the name Oneg Shabbos because the staff that Ringelblum attracted met on Shabbos afternoon underground. So Oneg Shabbos was a massive effort by participants in the resistance movement to document what was done to Jews in Eastern Europe. Ringelblum was a social historian. He got his training at a Warsaw institution, and before the war, he studied workers' movements in the Jewish labor force. With the outbreak, with the forced entrapment of Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, Ringelblum develops the idea that we may not survive, but our story has to survive. And so he finds supporters and allies in every sector of the Polish Jewish community. And they record in the next few years from 1940 to 43 with minute detail the different phases of Jewish life in the Warsaw Ghetto. You need to remember that in July of 1941, the ghetto had some 430,000 individuals confined in an extremely small area. During the next few years, till the Great Deportation, some 100,000 Jews would simply die from malnutrition, from lack of health care. It was clear what Lucy Davidovich already sensed, that killing Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto through through lack of health care, through lack of food, was an early implementation of the final solution. Passo does a marvelous job at giving us an insider's view of what went on. This resistance was not meant to defeat the Germans. This resistance was simply meant to inform the world one day what happened to the victims. During the Warsaw Uprising from April 1943, the leadership that was left in Warsaw was acutely aware that they were not fighting to beat the Germans. As they informed the Polish government in London, they were fighting to preserve human dignity. And Ringelblum, in his Oneg Shabbos undertaking, was also attempting to leave the world after the Nazis had been crushed with the evidence of their guilt. And it's important to stress that the Oneg Shabbos undertaking and Emanuel Ringelblum's leadership was not solitary. In many of the other ghettos that Trunk studies in Eastern Europe, there were individuals who wrote diaries, who preserved documents. There were some collective efforts at collecting information, so that in many areas after the war, it became possible to begin the painstaking reconstruction of the fate of the victims. The leadership under Ringelblum realized by 1943, July, when the deportations intensified to Treblinka, that the end was near. They collected their documents, they put them in 3 milk cans and hid them underground. Only 2 of those 3 milk cans have ever been recovered. One was recovered in 1946, a second was recovered in 1950, and to this day, the third remains hidden. And the suspicion is that it unfortunately stands under the Chinese embassy in Warsaw. So with Trunk and Passau, we have now focused on the victims. And my final historian, who I think has changed the nature of Holocaust research from here on, is Timothy Snyder. Timothy Snyder was born in Ohio. He teaches history at Yale, and he is a master of Polish, Russian, Yiddish, German, French, the language necessary to do the history of the victims as well as the history of the perpetrators. In 2010, Snyder produced a book called Bloodlands. It is a shocking title meant to attract the attention of readers. 2010 studies the terrain between Moscow and Berlin, or if you wish, between Smolensk and Posen. This is the heartland of Eastern Europe. And in this heartland, from the early 1930s to 1945, there are some 14 million Europeans killed by the Russians and by the Germans. Stalin and Hitler are the epitome of totalitarian power. Snyder goes back, in a sense, to Hannah Arendt. You need to study both regimes in order to fully understand what happened in the heartlands of Europe. Stalin was a mass murderer on a scale equal to that of Hitler in massacres from the early 30s to the 1939-40 period. Stalin wipes out millions of Eastern Europeans. He begins with the kulaks in Ukraine. Russia should never have been the place of a Marxist revolution. It had no industrialization. Stalin was going to correct that he was going to industrialize the Ukraine, and to do that, he starved systematically 3 million kulaks. And after the starvation of the kulaks in 36, 37, you have a terror pogrom against the older leadership of the Bolshevik Revolution. Another 700,000 are killed by trials orchestrated by Stalin. And after he has vanquished the older leadership,
I said, I'm coming, baby, please, you can't. I said, I'm coming.
he goes after the generals of the Russian army. And in 38 and 39, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of officers and generals in the Russian, the Soviet army who are exterminated. So when Hitler decides to invade Russia in June of 1941, the Soviet army is decidedly weakened. The Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement of 1939 divides Poland. The eastern half of Poland is turned over to Stalin, and Stalin joins Hitler in the eradication of the Polish elite. There are some 200,000 Polish officers, educated liberal arts Polish citizens destroyed by Stalin in 39 to 41. Katyn is a forest in Poland where some 20,000 Polish officers, members of the leadership class, are killed by Stalin. And of course, the murder, when it is discovered by the Poles, blamed on the Nazis rather than the Russians. The Russians were determined to cleanse Eastern Poland because they wished, after the end of the war, to annex it to the Soviet Union. And they do not want any competitive local leadership. So while Stalin is eradicating the leadership class in Eastern Poland, Hitler is doing the same in Western Poland. When Hitler invades in June of 1941, to the utter disbelief of Stalin, Hitler has 4 objectives. He wants to wipe out the Soviet regime in a blitzkrieg. The war would engender the collapse of the Soviet government. 2, he would kill off some 30 million Russians to make room for Germans whom he wanted to settle there, and he would kill them through famine, through starvation. Finally, thirdly, he would now use the opportunity to deport the Jews, whom he had been hoping to eliminate from German society for a long time. And finally, he wanted to make the Generalplan Ost a German colony where Germans could now be settled. By December of 1941, Snyder argues, Hitler failed. Leningrad resisted. Moscow was not about to fall. The Russian government, the Soviet government, simply backtracked, but the government did not disintegrate. And Stalingrad in the south held out. So the invasion, it was a three-pronged invasion. And by December, any insightful political leader realized that Hitler's plan was a disaster. And Snyder now argues that in order to cover up his failure, Snyder embraces the final solution. The final solution is what Hitler now persuades his followers is what he had in mind from the beginning. He downplays those objectives that he failed to achieve. He upgrades the final solution as if this was the purpose of the invasion in the first place. And I cannot stress enough that this is a radical reinterpretation of the final solution. Snyder is not a determinist. Snyder appreciates the zigzag nature of historical evolution. The deportation of Jews was, to be sure, in Hitler's mind for decades, but deportation could have been to Madagascar. Goering already in 1939 dusts off the Madagascar plan. Hitler also revives it in 1941. The only trouble with the Madagascar plan is the Germans didn't control Madagascar. It was a French colony. So the final solution is embraced by Hitler to cover up his other political and military failures. To be sure, the killing of Jews by Einsatzgruppen began early after the invasion, but those massacres in the Ukraine were part of Hitler's effort to take over the Ukraine, to make it the breadbasket of Germany. Hitler was tormented by the famine that afflicted Germany in the second half of World War I because of the British blockade. And so Hitler wanted to annex the Ukraine in order to make sure that in World War II, Germans would never suffer from famine. So the Einsatzgruppen did their dirty work early on, but the extermination camps are largely the product of 1942 and Hitler's cover-up. So it is this that gives us a deeper understanding of the genesis of the Holocaust. If Davidovich effected an enlargement of the expanse of Holocaust research, Snyder did it again. After Snyder, you cannot study the Holocaust without including the other side. The relationship between East and West is diplomatic as well as military. And Snyder is a master of the archival research that has been unearthed in Eastern Europe, showing the give and take politically between Poland and Germany, between Russia and Germany. So Snyder is telling the full story. And that full story displeased quite a few Jewish historians of the Holocaust. They felt that a little too much attention was being paid to the suffering of the Polish victims. There was a downplaying, it appeared to Jewish historians, of what suffering the Jews felt from Nazi oppression. So Snyder, who is himself not Jewish, felt obliged to study the Holocaust more deeply. And so in 2015, he produced another book called Earth. Black Earth. So he went from Bloodlands to Black Earth. And Black Earth is a deeper study of the Holocaust itself. And it is an effort by Snyder to do justice to the extent of Jewish suffering in the Holocaust. What's the meaning of the title? Black Earth is the Ukraine. Yes, Snyder is giving a contextual understanding of the Holocaust.
Ja,
But he does not lose sight of the
was
fact
hast du?
that Hitler's objective
Ja.
was the Ukraine. And so he calls his book Black Earth. And my argument is that after Snyder's expansion of Holocaust research, it is no longer possible to go back to the circumference of Hilberg or the circumference of Lucy Davidovich. One now needs to encompass all of Central European history to identify the origin and the development of the final solution. That, I think, is the arc of Holocaust research in the last 75 years, from 1951 and Hannah Arendt to Timothy Snyder in 2010 and 2015. But I do not want to end on this sober note. I want to come back to Germany and the celebration that you are enjoying currently, the 1700 years of Jewish creativity in German lands. And I would like to do that by bringing another book to your attention. It is a book written by Susan Neiman called Learning from the Germans. Susan Neiman is the director of the Einstein Institute in Berlin, which is a dynamic platform for the exploration of important political, cultural themes, past and present. The thesis of her book is that Americans have much to learn from the Germans. Over the last 75 years, the Germans have made an uneven but steady mastery of their history, Vergangenheitsaufarbeitung. They have mastered their past by confronting it. And Nyman, who was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but who has lived in Germany for decades now, writes a comparative study of the manner in which Germans have faced their past and Americans. And the bottom line of her research is that the American effort to confront its slavery and racism has been woefully inadequate, far inferior, far less courageous than the effort by the Germans to confront their own past. It is a powerful indictment of the deep-seated nature of racism in American society. There are many countries that are guilty of original sin, and it is exceedingly difficult to overcome the guilt of original sin. The American original sin continues to torment American society. The long history of anti-Semitism in Germany that culminated with the final solution is an original sin that Germans confronted bravely. They did it slowly. There is often a retreat as well as an advance, but the arc of that working through is an enormous achievement. There is not another country in the world that has mustered and sustained the confrontation with its original sin like Germany. And that means that the 1700 years of German history, of Jewish history in German lands, did not end in 1945. It continues. The Holocaust and its aftermath is a caesura. It is an interruption of Jewish life. But the extent of Jewish restoration in Germany is a celebration of continuity. And I can demonstrate that in a single fact. After 1945, Jewish historians had to study German in order to read the Jewish research published before 1939. German was the lingua franca of Jewish scholarship before 1939. Today, Jewish historians, whether they write on Eastern Europe or the United States or German Jewish history, need to study German, not only to read the older history, but to read the current history produced by German scholars and Jewish scholars working in German universities throughout Germany. That is a reflection that the caesura was temporary, that Jewish life is back in Germany and the creativity of Jews in German lands continues to this day. Thank you.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, Herr Schorsch. Ich bin etwas erschöpft vom Mitschreiben. Sie sind bestimmt erschöpft vom Erzählen. Das war eine großartige Reise durch die Geschichtsschreibung. Einmalig. So. Jetzt kommt für mich der entspannendere Teil. Und für uns kommt auch gleich wieder schöne Musik. Aber während wir Sterndl Sterndl von Ascher Heinowitz und Raymond Goldstein hören, haben jetzt alle die Möglichkeit, das zu tun, was ich eben gemacht habe. Sie können, wenn Sie Fragen haben, wenn Sie Wünsche haben, wenn Sie Anregungen haben, können Sie als Publikum jetzt in den Chat schreiben. Und wir werden nach dem Lied Sterndl Sterndl versuchen, darauf einzugehen. In English, for everybody who didn't understand. Thank you very, very much, Professor Schorsch, for a wonderful and breathtaking talk. Galloped through a lot of many thousands of pages of the writing of Jewish history and of the history of the Holocaust. You as the audience now have the opportunity to write in the chat, which I've been doing for the last half an hour. While we listen to the next song, you may write any questions you have or comments you have in the chat, and we will do our best to reply to them or respond to them after we have heard the next song from Ascher Heinowitz and Raymond Goldstein, Sterndl Sterndl.
Thank you. Just a few words about this song. It was written by Moshe Kubalk, who lived in Lithuania. He was a very strong, devout socialist. Eventually, he finds himself in Russia. But unfortunately, like we heard before, in the days of Stalin, he finds himself in Siberia, in a gulag. He knows that he'll never come out alive. He wants to communicate with his wife and children. He sees a falling star. So he says, Sterndl, Sterndl, falling star, please fall in my shtetl. You don't know where the shtetl is, I'll tell you. You'll see a little hill, and then you'll see a hole in the ground, and you'll see a little house, and you'll see a woman sitting there very upset. This is my wife. Give her my regards, and tell her that I read the letters of my wife and the 3 children of Yankale, of Leale, and of Rivkale, and tell them how much I miss them. And one more thing, please, little Stern, tell my wife that she should look after my little boy Yankale, and that he should learn Kaddish properly, because who knows, he knows that the prayer after the death will be have to said by little Yankale. Sterndl, Sterndl. Sterndl, Sterndl, bloyer Stafetale, sei mir a Schliachel und fall in mein Shtetl. Sei mir a Schliachel und fall in mein Shtetl. Sen Vesta Bergele, noch dem Agribale, dorten gefind sich mein Chorbestiebele. Dorten gefind sich mein Chorbestiebele. Sterndl, Sterndl. allein bei dem finsteren Scheiberle, sitzt dort vertreuert und eiget mein Weibele, sitzt dort vertreuert und eiget mein Weibele. Reist ihr, du Sterndl, leicht ihr in Stube rein. Sog ihr, der Räuberster wird sich merachem sein. Sog ihr, der Räuberster wird sich merachem sein. Frag, was macht Jankalle, Leitje und Ribele, sog sie ich lein und kusch sehr Brivele, sog sie ich lein und kusch sehr Brivele. Sog sie as Jankallen soll men nicht jalven, geben min Cheder genug ihm zu balven. Geben min Cheder genug ihm zu balven. Soll sich auslernen, sogen Kaddisch, wie es darf zu sein. Efter men weiß nicht, nur Gott soll mir Rachem sein. Efter men weiß nicht, soll Gott nur mir Rachem sein. Sternl, Sternl, bläuer Stafetele, sei mir a Schliachl und fall in mein Städtele. Sei mir a Schliachl und fall in mein Städtele.
Thank you. Vielen Dank. Es gibt ein paar Dankesworte. Es gibt den Wunsch, die Liste der Bücher zu erhalten und eine konkrete Frage. We have several people writing to thank you, Professor Schorsch, for the talk. People who wish for, somebody who wishes for the list of the books, that's no problem. We can email that to people. And one specific question for Herr Schorsch. Wie sieht Herr Schorsch die Situation der Juden in den USA? Professor Schorsch, how do you see the situation of Jews in the USA? And I'll try to translate the reply in the chat.
First, I want to thank Cantor Heinovitz. Your song reflected the painful wishes of thousands. The situation of Jews in the United States has never been stronger. The Jews are politically secure. They are highly educated. They are economically successful. And they are, especially with the new administration, politically influential. unrest in America is not a Jewish problem. It's an American problem. The history of politics in America has never witnessed a presidential candidate who has refused to admit defeat. If I could make a suggestion, it would be that no one is permitted to run for political office without saying in advance that if he or she loses, they will step aside. I think the situation that former President Trump has created is exceedingly dangerous because, unfortunately, a large sector of the Republican Party continues to believe it, that the election was stolen. That is the threat to American democracy. Jewish life is intimately connected with American democracy. So if American democracy is eroded, the security of American Jews will also be in jeopardy.
Sorry, I typed more slowly than you reply. Thank you very much. We have one more question. No, another very heartfelt thank you. Also ein Dankeschön von Herzen noch von einem aus dem Publikum für den interessanten Vortrag und die wunderbaren jiddischen Lieder. If there are no more questions in the chat, wenn wir keine weiteren Fragen haben, können wir an Frau Hariti und Herrn Fürst überleiten, die noch zum Schluss etwas mitzuteilen wollen. It's now time for Tova Hariti and Michael Fürst to address us. They have some information they want to give us before we close the evening with a last song from Asher Heinowitz and Raymond Goldstein, the very popular song Kinderjahren von Gebürtig. Also nach den Worten von Herrn Fürst und Frau Hariti schließen wir den Abend mit einem letzten Lied von Herrn Heinowitz und Herrn Goldstein, Kinderjahren, eines der beliebtesten Lieder von Gebürtig. Aber erstmal Frau Hariti und Herr Fürst.
First of all, thank you very much for all Adinians all around the world. Well, we are really very appreciate you that you come and you take your time to be with us this evening. And on this opportunity, I just want to ask Mr. Fürst to announce the next date that we prepared for all of you, and I hope you will enjoy it. Please, Mr. Fürst.
Yeah, dear friend, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, it was very a moving night, a wonderful lecture. Here is my charge. And I know exactly that Dr. J. Friedman was your student in reality. And now you have another 70 more senior students this evening. And we appreciate it very much to hear you and to hear Cantor Einovitz and Mr. Goldin. I'm sure we will follow up this in next month, and the next Wednesday meeting will be on the 5th of May, and we will have the lecture from Professor Manfred Lahnstein, the former federal minister for economy and later for finance under the Chancellor Helmut Schmidt. And he has a strong relation to Israel, and he will be, I would say, a wonderful follow-up for Ismail George. Thank you all very much that you were with us this evening. I think the 1700 years of Jews in Germany will be a lot of more years, lot of more centuries and thousands of years in Germany. Thank you very much.
Kinderjahren, süße Kinderjahren, ewig bleibt ihr wach in Meisikoren. Wenn ich tracht von eurer Zeit, wird mir also bang und leid. Oi, wie schnell ich bin schon alt geworden. Kinderjahren, junge, schöne Blumen. Zurück zu mir wird ihr schon mehr nicht kommen. Jahren, kalte, treurige, schwarze Morosch, heurige, oben eier schönen Platz vernommen. Und mein Mame, ach, wie ich pfleg sie lieben. Hotsch in Cheder hat sie mir getrieben. Jeder Knipp von ihr Hand ist mir so gut bekannt. Hotsch kein Zeichen ist mir nicht geblieben. Kinderjahren, schöne Kinderjahren, ewig bleibt ihr doch in Meisikoren. Wenn ich tracht von eurer Zeit, wird mir also bang und leid. Oi, wie schnell ich bin schon alt geworden. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Edel Sheridan-Quantz. Thank you, Tova Reti. It was a great evening, and thank you that you helped us to do it. Thank you very much. Good night, good night to all. Good night to Sweden. Good night to Israel. Good night to South Africa. And thank you very much in the name of all my colleagues from the Landesverband der Jüdischen Gemeinden von Niedersachsen. I saw Marina Yalovaya was here. I saw that Mrs. Schlesinger from Oldenburg was here. And I can't see if any other were here because I can't see all. So I hope you had a good and informative evening, and I see you hopefully on the 5th of May. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. And
Michael and Tova, thank you so much for the initiative. And it was a fantastic evening.
Beautiful to see you and a beautiful lecture. Thank you very much. Kolla kabod.
Thank you. Thank you to all.
Ja. Så du nice to best liv.
Säger jag nog.
Die gaat
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night to Israel. Good
Ich
night,
weiß
Sweden.
nicht, Tommy, ihr hört uns. Zu Kantor Hajnowitz. Ein herzlichen Dank in Jiddisch. Die Kinderjungen sind gewesen, meine Kinderjungen. Und alle Lieder sind wunderbar gewesen. Erscheinem Dank.
תודה רבה, הגרויסן דנק.
Thank you very much.
היה שכוח.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Alla andra går, du kan vänta lite. Så jag
Ryggen, ja.
Rack.
Action, ja.
Han sitter i Israel.